most important legacy of the 2010 games, in a negative sense, was how much of a surveillance state we live in. And that, for me, was very educational, and I think for a lot of people, especially with the documents that the CBC was able to obtain last summer, that showed that the Government of Canada, acting on behalf of the Olympics, made the possibility of civil dissent a subject for surveillance. And for me, that was the most shocking revelation, that our society is not as free and democratic as we think it is. In terms of the most relevant outcome that might have been positive for the games, I honestly can't think of one. I guess the only thing we could say is that it's not as bad as Sochi. So we can take pride that we didn't do as much environmental destruction, as much displacement of people, and as much overall corruption and wasted spending as the Russians did. That's pretty much it in terms of legacies. The Athletes' Village, to the best of my knowledge, is still a white elephant. I don't know if the Callahan is being used. The RAV line is good for if you're going to the airport, but didn't solve the transportation problems of the city. The costs were, what they were, and I think we're still paying for that. And the economic benefits never materialized, and now we see the Premier pushing a new economic hobby horse, which is the liquefied natural gas, because remember, the Olympics were supposed to solve all of our economic problems well into the 21st century, and clearly they didn't. So in terms of outcomes, really nothing. And it's interesting to look now at the city and think, what really changed? Nothing. There's still people on the streets. There's still, the issues that were current then are still current. Nothing has really changed dramatically for the better or for worse. It's almost like it didn't happen in some sense, except for the debt.
Which leads me to another open-ended question. Was it money well spent?
I don't think so. Again, comparing it to the Russians, I guess we got a bargain. But no, it was not money well spent. That $6 billion, or whatever the real number turned out to be, could clearly have been used for many more beneficial things. That would have aided society at large, and not just the Jack Pools and the David Plotmores and their Bob Rennies of the city and their other friends. Clearly it was, as I think I stated numerous times, and I think you may have touched on in your book, it clearly was a development scheme. And as you look at the various things, especially looking at the Canby Corridor now, it becomes crystal clear that really that was what was driving an awful lot of the Olympic bandwagon, was the idea that you could develop and hyper-develop parts of the city for the Olympics and afterwards. And I guess one of the other negative legacies is it's made it a much more expensive city. The costs to average people have not gotten better. I think young people find it increasingly hard to live in the city. It's not just young people. I think anybody who's middle class or below is finding it very, very hard to live in the city. It's become a city of the wealthy, and to some extent that was the goal. And it did not, for example, however, become a world-class city. I've just come back from Paris, as you know, and it ain't Paris, that's for sure. And nothing really changed, and we saw how little things had actually changed for the better with the Hockey Cup riot, which was just over a year and some later, where supposedly coming off the high of the Olympics, we lose a hockey game to the Boston Bruins, and the city erupts in burning police cars, which is absolutely ridiculous in a city that's supposedly a mature, world-class city.
And what was the biggest lesson of the 2010 Games?
I think the biggest lesson, personally, was the extent to which we are a security state, and to which civil liberties are taken for granted by most of us, but don't really exist in reality, and how the government and the various agencies of the government walk through the charter and around it and over it and ignore it whenever they feel willing to do so, or they feel like they need to do so, and that it's essentially a piece of paper that has no force, because the transparency that's supposed to be mostly in our favor, where we're supposed to be able to look at RCMP and other agencies of the government, doesn't really exist, as you know from FOI and other things, how hard it is to be able to peer inside what they do, and yet when they want to peer at what we do, it becomes an open book for them. And that was demonstrated time and time again by the surveillance that went on continuously by who knows what level of surveillance, whether it was reading emails, listening to phones, and we know for sure following us on the streets, and being in our workplaces, and being in our homes, and being around us all the time. It was very much an example of what policing should not be in this country, and how the democratic process should not work, because, again, the rights and freedoms are only as good as what they're demonstrated to be, and they were demonstrated to be fairly tenuous at best.
What advice would you have for the people in Sochi?
Good luck. I think the people in Sochi are just screwed. I mean, what's happened in Sochi is remarkable by any standard. First of all, it's in Russia. So, although I note that Putin is not talking about protest zones, which is interesting because Vancouver, of course, wanted to create protest zones. He's talking about protest zones, but of course, the ability to protest in Russia is somewhat limited, to say the least. The cost has been extraordinary. It's $51 billion, latest CBC estimate, which is really, really amazing. And again, that's probably an underestimate. The civil rights issues and the displacement issues, the suppression of the Circassian people of the area, are all fairly dramatic examples of how the games have really pandered to the worst in governments and society. It's not really for the betterment of humankind, it's for the betterment of the IOC, and they will go to any regime, no matter how despicable, and try and carry on the games. And in fact, I'm sure they probably like Russia for that perspective. I mean, they don't care about the gay and lesbian issues, they don't care about civil rights issues, they don't give a rat's ass about the Circassians, they certainly don't care about environmental destruction, so Russia is just perfect for them.
And finally, the next big mega sports event, multi-sport event, would be bigger than Vancouver 2010, is the Toronto Pan Am Games in 2015. What about advice to people in Toronto and Southern Ontario?
Well, get ready for your city to be locked down, and get ready to, if you're protesting the Pan Am Games, get ready to have surveillance going on all the time. Get ready to find that any protest is equated to criminality, and dissent makes you disloyal as a Torontonian or an Ontarian or a Canadian, and that your city is going to change for that period of time, and you will not be able to go about your business quite the same way, because it is for the benefit of the people who run the games and the things they're trying to promote, but not for your benefit. So again, good luck. Wish you all the best. I'm sure many people now in Toronto are wishing it weren't coming, but it is, and so probably the best advice, do what a lot of people did in Vancouver, is get out of town, go somewhere else for that period, and let other people deal with the disruption. However, having said that, if you really want to go express your view, go out in the streets with a placard and see how far you get with that, and express your displeasure to the powers that be.